Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Kallas. Speaking of sports, we're at WestchesterCountyPost.com. Please go to that website, click on sports videos, sports articles. There's a lot of other good stuff there as well. But today we're here to talk about Notre Dame's big game this Saturday at the Big House in Michigan, October 26th, 7:30 p.m. on ABC. And this is a big game for Notre Dame. Jim Harbaugh, the coach of Michigan, says it's a big game for Michigan. Jim Harbaugh has had his problems at Michigan. He's 0-4 against Ohio State. And you college football fans know that's the biggest game of the year for Michigan and for Ohio State. But this is a big game for Notre Dame as well. Notre Dame still has a chance, as we've talked about all year, despite losing to Georgia, to make the Final Four of college football, to make that playoff. They have to run the table. They beat USC their last game. They had a bye this past week, which is helpful to them in prepping for Michigan. But Michigan played Penn State last week, and last Saturday, and we're going to talk a little bit about Michigan based on some quotes from the Chip Kelly press conference. From the Coach Brian Kelly press conference. And here's essentially what he said. Michigan played great against Penn State. Penn State number 6, Michigan went on the road. They were losing 21-0. They battled back to 28-21. And the game ended literally, the last 2 minutes, literally with the quarterback of Michigan, Shea Patterson, throwing the ball into the end zone for a tying touchdown that was just dropped. And after that, Penn State was able to run out the clock. So Michigan dominated Penn State in the second half. Again, Penn State number 6 in the country. They're a very good team. So Michigan looks like they're coming on now. They lost badly to Wisconsin. They're 5-2. So this is going to be a tough game for Notre Dame. I know Michigan's a slight favorite. I don't know what that means. But here's a few things that Coach Brian Kelly had to say about the Michigan Wolverines. First, here's a quote that he had about Shea Patterson, who has had essentially 4 offenses in 4 years. He's a senior quarterback and is now seemed to be coming into his own under this new leadership this year. But I thought Coach Kelly described him well, and here's what he said. Shea Patterson, quote, "He's tough, he's gritty, he's accurate when he throws the football. He can run it. He throws a very catchable ball, and he's got big physical receivers that go up and get the football for him." Now, he threw for 276 yards against Penn State. They rushed for 141 yards as well. That's a lot of yardage against a very good team. So they're going to be a big factor in this game, led by the senior, Shea Patterson. Now, they have a bunch of good receivers. Nico Collins, they have Peoples-Jones, they have Eubanks, the tight end. But the main receiver, the best receiver, again, according to Coach Kelly, is Ronnie Bell. And here's what he had to say about Ronnie Bell. Quote, "Bell's really the playmaker for them. He's their best receiver, an extremely competitive kid." And then something I thought was a little bit surprising for Brian Kelly to say. After that, he said, quote, "Look to see him have a really big game. He's that kind of player." Now, he is that kind of player. I didn't think the coach of Notre Dame would say expect him to have a big game, but he's a big-time player, Ronnie Bell. And these other receivers are big. They're fast. They can catch the ball. You can throw them 50-50 balls up in the air, and they have a better than 50-50 chance to catch them. He also focused on Zach Charbonnet, the true freshman running back who rushed for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns against Penn State. And Penn State's pretty good against the run. So again, they're talented wide receivers, tight end, running back, quarterback. Their offensive line, which Coach Kelly also talked about, has 4 of the 5 starters from last year returning, so they're very experienced. All in all, a pretty good offense. And again, lost the game to Penn State on the road, but dominated Penn State in the second half. I'm going to talk briefly about the defense. I'm going to read a couple of quotes again from Coach Kelly's press conference. And he thinks their defense is terrific. And I'll just give you a few from defensive line all the way back to the DBs. He talked about their defensive linemen, quote, Pay, Kemp, Hutchinson, who has a great motor. They're all great players. They are athletic, they can pass rush, and they're really good against the run. He singled out one of their linebackers, Hudson, who, quote, is the guy really. He can play at all three levels and is a really, really good player for them. Now, Hudson's an interesting guy. He's listed as both a linebacker and a DB, but apparently goes on the front line as well. And you don't see many players in college football able to play at all three levels on the defense. He also talked about the back end. Josh Metellus and Brad Hawkins, quote, have a lot of experience. Lavert Hill is, quote, a really good cornerback. So they have a very good defense. They're a very solid team. He was asked a specific question at the press conference as to whether or not Notre Dame would be able to run the ball, and that's going to be a big factor. And that leads us into looking at Notre Dame's a little bit. Tony Jones Jr. has really done a good job in the absence of Jafar Armstrong. Now, you'll recall when we talked about the USC game, Coach Kelly said that Jafar Armstrong was going to play and get about 20 plays. He actually played very sparingly. I guess he wasn't 100% or wasn't as good as they'd hoped he'd be. Now he's had a week off and another week to prepare, so it's 2 weeks since the USC game. And here's what Coach Kelly said about Jafar Armstrong. He said, quote, Jafar is going to be an important part of our game plan, and quote, he will play a prominent role. Now that's very important because you guys, you Notre Dame fans know Jafar Armstrong is not only their best running back, but he's their best dual threat. He's a very good running back, but he's also a very good receiver out of the backfield. And Notre Dame really doesn't have another back quite like that. So if Armstrong can really play, and again, people thought he would play a lot 2 weeks ago, he didn't. But now he should be 2 weeks healthier. He had that groin area injury. And if he can play, he's going to be a big factor in this game because not only can he run it, but he can catch it as well. The other guy I wanted to talk about and give a quote from is the DB, Sean Crawford. He had that dislocated elbow. He missed a lot of time, but he's back. And Coach Kelly said, quote, we expect him to play. We'll see at what level he can play at, close quote. You can also expect 6'3" defensive back Dante Vaughn to play a lot. The wide receivers, kind of like USC, the wide receivers from Michigan are big, they're strong, they're talented, and you could use a 6'3" guy like Dante Vaughn playing DB, so he's going to get more time than he's gotten in the past. It's also interesting, you guys know the 4-game rule. You can play 4 games this year, not play any more games, and have another year of eligibility. Dalen Hayes, who got hurt, he played 4 games. He's already coming back. The other defensive end on a very good team, Notre Dame with defensive ends. But this might be Vaughn's final game because they might hold him back for next year. I assume a decision will be made after the game. It's a new rule. And again, if you play 4 or less games and no more for this year, you can come back and play next year. We'll see how that shakes out. But Dalen Hayes is injured now, so he is already coming back next year. I thought they could have used him this year myself. So finally, the conclusion on this game for me is it's a big game for both teams. It's hard to go to Michigan, 100,000 screaming fans. But I think Notre Dame gets the job done. They're deep on both sides of the ball. Excellent offensive line, excellent defensive ends, as you know. I think they're going to do enough to get the win. But again, a very tough place to play. And again, Michigan, I thought, played their best game of the year, even though they lost against the number 6 team in the country on the road. I still think Notre Dame can win, and if they get past this game, they've got a very good chance to run the table, and maybe with a little help with other teams losing, make the Final Four in the college football playoff. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports. We'll see you the next time.